Okay, so we're going to go ahead and continue to go back to the orally transmitted teachings and continue to slug through and read it a second time. And so I've gotten up to page 17. We left on page 16. It was the end of the foreword from President Ikeda. We start with the introduction, the life of Nichiren. Nichiren was born this is page from 17. Nichiren was born in a fishing village called Kataomi in Awa province, part of the present-day Chiba prefecture of Tokyo. The date was the 16th day of the second month of 1222. It means he was Aquarius on the lunar calendar in use at the time, a date that corresponds to April 6, 1222 on the Gregorian calendar. His family made their living by fishing, which because it involves the taking of life, you got to kill the fish, was looked on as a very lowly occupation. His childhood name was Renichi Maro, Zen meaning good, and Nichi meaning son. Maro is a common suffix for a boy's name. At age 12, he entered a nearby temple called xxiv to begin his primary education. Since no public school system existed at the time, education for children of unprivileged families was available only at Buddhist temples. xxiv was an influential temple of the Tendai school, which upholds the teachings of the Lotus Sutra, predicated on the teachings of the Tentai School of China, Tentai School of China. But at this time, it was also a place for practice for esoteric Buddhism and the Pure Land doctrine, neither of which hold the Lotus Sutra in high esteem. Okay, and so what is esoteric Buddhism? That's a true word. That's Tibetan Buddhism, but nobody's doing Tibetan Buddhism in Japan. The bottom line is esoteric means hidden. It means secret. And the Pure Land doctrine, which of course that's the Nimbutsu that we spoke of earlier, neither of which hold the Lotus Sutra in high esteem, from another video we've done in the last 4 days. Pardon me, not this one. It's not in the forward. It's from the Gosho. As a boy at xxiv, Nichiren tells us he used to pray before a statue of Bodhisattva Kokuzo, or Space Treasury, Bodhisattva Space Treasury, that was enshrined there at xxiv. And again, understand that that temple was not just Lotus Sutra, it was also True Word, it was also Nimbutsu, okay? So somebody tried to, many years ago, qualify that the story of how he put his wish on the hand of Kokuzo. Kokuzo's got his one hand out, all right? So bottom line is that this is before he's like indoctrinated into the Lotus Sutra. This is still while he's a 16-year-old just entering the priesthood. But the key here is that from the very beginning, his desire was to become the wisest person in Japan. And that's what he prayed to this object of devotion of Bodhisattva Space Treasury. That's what his prayer was. He wanted to be the wisest person in Japan. So a statue of Kokuzo, or Space Treasury, that was enshrined there, and hoping and vowing to become the wisest person in all Japan. Why such an extraordinary desire? Because that's a little over the top for most people. We may surmise from his writings that he sought the wisdom to answer certain vital questions that troubled him. Now, actually, that's the same reason I kept reading deeper and deeper into the Gosho, because what I thought I knew, I didn't know. I was postgraduate in the study department. I thought I already definitely knew all what this was saying until I came back to it with my life rather than an organizational testing process or something more superficial. I came back as a disciple of Nichiren saying, how could this happen? What did I miss? That's my prayer. My only prayer is to understand what I didn't understand. And I got that prayer answered. Continue on page 18. On In 1221, the year before Nichiren's birth, the retired emperor, that is 1218, or in page 18. In 1221, second paragraph, first full paragraph. The year before Nichiren's birth, the retired emperor Go-Toba, the de facto leader of the imperial family, along with two other retired emperors, had attempted to overthrow the shogunate, the military government headquartered in Kamakura. That event, known as the Jokyu disturbance, because it took place in the third year of the Jokyu era, ended in the defeat of the imperial forces and the exile of the three leaders. The young Nichiren wondered why the imperial family, the legitimate ruler of Japan, had suffered such a tragic defeat, because they had all the temples praying for them. You know, they were in charge of everything. Though it had sponsored prayers for victory by priests from of the prestigious Tendai and True Word School. So they'd gone to Enrakuji. Enrakuji was behind those three retired emperors, okay? Japanese Buddhism at the time was made up of a number of different schools, preaching a variety of doctrines and urging the adaptation of this or that religious practice. Nichiren wondered why Buddhism had become divided in this fashion when it was the teaching of a single Buddha, Shakyamuni. He was concerned that, though Buddhism existed to save people from suffering and to bring peace and stability to society, it apparently lacked the power to accomplish these goals. As a young man, he tried to determine just what truth Shakyamuni had awakened to, and how he himself could lead the people away from suffering. Hence, he prayed for the wisdom needed to realize these aims. At 16, he decided to become a priest, renouncing secular life and devoting himself to Buddhist studies. Entering the priesthood under the tutelage of Dozenbo, a senior priest at the temple, he took on the name Rincho, which means lotus growth. Later, he continued his studies at the major centers of Buddhism in Kamakura, Kyoto, and Nara, carefully reading all the sutras available to him. And why did he go to different places? Because there were sutras that weren't in one place that might be in another, okay? It wasn't to double check the accuracy of anything. It was because he wanted to read all of the teachings and understand all of the teachings. Carefully reading all sutras available to him, he delved into the essential doctrines, okay? Where does this say this? Where does it say that? What is the most important, profound, and correct kind of thing that it is saying? He delved into the essential doctrines of the various schools, both Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism, okay? Of both Hinayana and Mahayana Buddhism. In Letter to the Priests of Seishoji, written in 1276, he described his spiritual pursuit at that time, referring to himself in the third person. As a youth, he received, again, in third person. So he's speaking of himself, even though he's speaking as though he's somebody, reflecting on himself, on Nichiren. As a youth, he received great wisdom from the living Bodhisattva space treasury. He prayed to the Bodhisattva to become the wisest person in Japan. The Bodhisattva must have taken pity on him, for he presented him with a great jewel as brilliant as a morning star, which Nichiren tucked away in his right sleeve. Thereafter, on pursuing the entire bodies of sutras, he was able to discern, in essence, the relative worth of the 8 schools as well as the relative scriptures. This is from the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, Volume 1, page 650, where he makes this quote and qualifies what his childhood was. So what he basically says is he gave him a bright jewel and he tucked it in his sleeve, was that he came to a personal epiphany. His own individual enlightenment began at that time. That's when he was able to begin the process of truly discerning the previous teachings of Shakyamuni and understanding what the different schools' belief sets were and where they might be in conflict with the reality of what the teachings had actually said. So he says, the great jewel to which he refers can be identified as the wisdom of the mystic law. Okay, we can qualify this as self-attained awakenedness, a self-attained enlightenment to perceive the truth of what Shakyamuni was saying. And now let me delve into all the doctrines to totally perceive it. So rather than being overwhelmed with trying to do something so ridiculously almost impossible to master all the sutras, he was endowed with something that allowed him to feel that he had the ability and to perceive exactly where there were correct and where there are incorrect teachings. Okay? It says, okay, so the great jewel to which he refers can be identified as the wisdom of the mystic law or the wonderful law, the universal, in other words, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, before he realized it as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The universal law by which he would later, at a later date, after he'd done all these studies, announce to the rest of the world. But in the meantime, this was something that he kept to himself. And he felt that it came directly as a result of his desire and prayer to be the wisest person in Japan for the sake of the people. Okay. So the great jewel by which he refers can be identified as the wisdom of the mystic law or the wonderful law, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the universal law by which all Buddhists become enlightened, and the foundation of all the Buddhist teachings, which is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That's the only thing that, describing it that way, that's what is qualifying. That's the general conception of what occurred. In the course of his studies, Nichiren arrived at some key conclusions, which may be summarized as follows. Number one, the Lotus Sutra is supreme among all the sutras that Shakyamuni expounded. Two, the wonderful law to which Nichiren awakened is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the core teaching of the Lotus Sutra. The sutra describes the Buddha entrusting the bodhisattvas of the earth with the mission of spreading this core teaching and enabling the people of the latter day of the law to attain Buddhahood. Nichiren, having realized the wonderful law, identified himself with Bodhisattva superior practices as the one who would fulfill the mission of revealing and spreading the essence of the Lotus Sutra, which he had realized as Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Four, he recognized that the various Buddhist doctrines that prevailed at the time all shared a common element, that of slandering or going against the correct teaching of the Buddha as it is embodied in the Lotus Sutra. He decided to, because basically all the other schools were blowing up what the Lotus Sutra actually literally says. In these more than 40 years, the Immeasurable Meaning Sutra, in these more than 40 years, I have yet to reveal the truth. Everything's been expedient means, he says then in the sutra itself. And you must now hear for the first time of this wondrous law that is the basis of all things and is the source of my Buddhahood. Okay, so he decided to reveal, but again, Shakyamuni talks about the law, but he never reveals what it is. All right, he decided to reveal and rebuke the slander committed by these schools, fully realizing that he would meet with great persecutions that the sutra predicts will assail a practitioner who does so, as it is predicted for us as well. Now, it was clear to him which course or what course he should take, though he might face harsh opposition and even place his life in peril. At noon on the 28th day of the 4th month of 1253, Rincho, who had renamed himself Nichiren, or Sun Lotus, stationed himself on the veranda of one of the buildings of Seichoji Temple and delivered a sermon to an audience gathered in the courtyard. His preaching, in which he was supposed to display the results of his years of study, turned out to be a surprise to the gathering, for he relentlessly refuted the Pure Land doctrine, Nimbutsu, and the other schools endorsed by his hearers. So here he's come back after having been gone from Seichoji, and he's gone out on this, process of self-realization and reading all of the different sutras. And when he comes back to report that event and that journey, he tells everybody, you're doing the wrong thing. In resounding tones, he recited Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, proclaiming it to be the only teaching capable of leading people to enlightenment or Buddhahood in the latter day of the law. And he's saying this, no one else has ever heard of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. He's saying the conclusion I came to is now the supreme teaching for all mankind. And that was not received well by the authorities in power that had come to watch him give his expression of his travels. This event is known as the declaration of the establishment of his teaching. That evening at Seichoji Temple, when he reported, you guys are all doing the wrong thing, and it should all now, everybody should be chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. News of this reached Tojo Kagenobu, the steward of the village where the temple was located, who was an ardent believer in the Nembutsu, or the Pure Land teachings. Nichiren suspected that he might face bodily attack from Tojo Kagenobu's warrior retainers, but through the help of fellow priests, he was able to leave the temple unharmed. He visited his parents nearby and converted them to his teachings, bestowing on his father the Buddhist name Myonichi, wonderful sun, and his mother the name of Myoren, wonderful lotus. Then he departed for Kamakura, the seat of the military government. He's going right into the heart of the hell. I mean, right into the heart of the resistance. He then departed for Kamakura, the seat of the military government, which would thereafter become the center of his propagation activities. In Kamakura, he took up residence in the area of Nagoe, in a simple dwelling at a place called Matsubagayatsu, from which he disseminated his teachings. He refuted the popular doctrines of the Pure Land school and the teachings of the Zen school, both of which were widely supported by members of the warrior class. And he's gone to Kamakura, where the warriors class is like most of the people on the street. He tried to awaken people to the correct teaching of the Lotus Sutra, chanting its daimoku, or title, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and encouraging others to do likewise. On the 11th month of 1253, a priest who would take the name Nisho, or sun glow, and later be designated one of the 6 senior priests by Nichiren, visited him at Matsubagayatsu and took faith in his teaching. That next year, Toki Jonin, a retainer of a provincial constable, also took faith. Nichiren held lectures at his dwellings and other places and wrote such works as On Attaining Buddhahood in This Lifetime in 1255. Around 1256, a number of people became followers of his teachings, including Shijo Kingo, Kuro Yoshitaka, and the Ikegami Muenaka. Around this time, the country was troubled by natural disturbances such as unusual weather patterns and major earthquakes. Grievous famines, fires, and epidemics added to the alarm. In particular, a severe earthquake rocked Kamakura in the 8th month of 1257, toppling many important structures and inflicting widespread injury. The people were plunged into misery and despair by these events. Pardon me. Faced with these new troubled times, Nichiren set out to discover the fundamental cause for such disasters and to seek some means of relieving the people's afflictions. In the second month of 1258, he began a stay at Jisho Temple in Suruga Province in present-day Shizuoka Prefecture, where he pored over the Buddhist sutras in order to find the solution. During his stay there, a young priest whom Nichiren would later name Nikko, Nikko, or Sun Vigor, and designate as his successor, became his disciple. So again, during his stay there, a young priest, Nikko, or Sun Vigor, and designated him as his successor, became his disciple. On the basis of his research there, he wrote his treatise entitled On Establishing the Correct Teaching for the Peace of the Land, on the Rishon Kokuran. On the 16th day of the 7th month of 1260, he submitted it to the retired regent Hojo Tokiyori, and the de facto leader of the shogunate. This event is known as his first remonstration with the rulers of the nation. The treatise first points out that the cause of the nation's calamities lies in the fact that the people have turned their backs on the correct Buddhist teaching and instead supported erroneous doctrines and teachers. The prime example of such an erroneous teaching is embodied in the doctrines of the Pure Land Amida school founded by Honen. The treatise states that if the people of Japan, both the rulers and the ruled, withdraw their support from this one evil doctrine of the Pure Land school and take faith in the correct teaching. And the Pure Land school is like what all the warriors do. So he's outright in the Risho and Kokoran. He's taken aim at exactly who they are and what they do, and saying that's the reason that the whole country is suffering. So you can imagine how offended the powers to be actually were at this young man coming out and saying it's all our fault for doing the wrong thing and embracing the wrong teachings from the wrong priests. He says, so he's saying, withdraw their support from this one evil doctrine of the Pure Land school and take faith in the correct teaching. This will bring about peace and security in the nation. So the solution is to shit can what you already been doing and believing and take my teaching instead. All right. It warns, however, that if they do not heed his advice, calamity will result, because it's all causality. It's cause and effect. It's the latter day of the law. Nichiren has appeared. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo now exists. All the other questions that could not be answered are all answered if they'll only listen to this teacher. The sutras predict that 7 types of calamities will befall those who oppose the correct teaching. 5 of the 7 types had already occurred. The treatise predicts that the other 2 types, internal strife and foreign invasion, will invariably follow. It therefore urges the rulers to act immediately and accept and uphold the correct teaching of Buddhism. The shogunate leaders, however, ignored his earnest appeal. Worse, passionate Pure Land adherents with the tacit support of key shogunate officials conspired to attack Nichiren. In 1260, on the evening of the 27th day of the 8th month, a throng of Pure Land believers stormed his dwelling at Matsubagayatsu, intending to kill him. This incident is known as the Matsubagayatsu persecution. Nichiren narrowly escaped the assault and for a time left Kamakura for the sake of his own safety. When he returned the following year, the shogunate ordered him arrested and without a full investigation of the charges against him, on the 12th day of the 5th month exiled him to the Ito on the Izu Peninsula on the Pacific coast southwest of Kamakura. A fisherman named Funamori Yasuburo and his wife supported and protected him during the exile. Because of these hardships that he had encountered in propagating the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren at this time became more convinced than ever that he was the very type of votary of the sutra described in the sutra itself. In the 2nd day of 1263, he was pardoned from what is known as the Izu exile and returned to Kamakura. The following year, he visited his home at province of Awa and to look after his mother, who was critically ill. As he wrote later, his prayer not only cured the illness, but prolonged her lifespan by 4 years. On the 11th day of the 11th month of the same year, when Nichiren and several of his followers were on their way to the home of the late believer Kudo Yoshitaka, they were attacked in ambush by the steward of the region, Tojo Kagenobu, the same dude that had tried to get him wasted before, and his warriors. Kudo received word of the attack and rushed to defend his teacher with a party of warriors. He was fatally wounded in the fight, and a priest named Kyo Ninbo was killed on the spot. Nichiren received a sword cut on the forehead and his left hand was broken. This incident is known as the Komatsubara persecution. In the intercalary month, 1st month of 1268, an official, so again, not January, based on the lunar New Year calendar, the lunar calendar. An official missive from the Mongol Empire arrived in Japan. It stated that if, so then the Mongol envoys come, and they tell the shogunate, who's in charge in Kamakura, it stated that if Japan did not comply with the demands of the Mongol Empire and acknowledge fealty to it, compliance would be forced upon it militarily, by military means. Nichiren perceived that his prediction of foreign invasion made in his writing on Establish the Correct Teaching was about to come true. In the 10th month of that year, he wrote to 11 leaders, including the regent, Tojo Tokimune, and other shogunate officials and priests of the major Kamakura temples, such as Ryokan of Gorakuji, Gokurakuji, and Doryu of Kinchoji temples, reminding them of his prediction and requesting that a public religious debate be held between himself and representatives of the leading Buddhist schools. Neither the government nor the religious leaders responded in good faith to his request. On the contrary, in other words, he tried to intervene and correct their incorrect thinking, which was karmically creating this cause for invasion, and maybe they could avoid the real invasion itself, right? The karma of the invasion itself. Okay, and so reminding them of his prediction and requesting that a public religious debate be held between himself and representatives of leading Buddhist schools. Neither the government nor the religious leaders responded in good faith to his request. On the contrary, the government officials regarded Nichiren and his followers as a threat and considered ways to suppress their activities. Despite the growing anger, Nichiren continued to point out the doctrinal errors of the major Buddhist schools, including 4 of them in particular in the brief statements known as the 4 dictums. Pure land leads, 1, pure land, Nimbutsu, leads to the hell of incessant suffering. 2, Zen is an invention of the heavenly devil because it's not from the sutras. True word, 3, true word is an evil doctrine that will ruin the country. And 4, precepts is a traitor to the nation. So despite the growing danger, Nichiren continued to point out the doctrinal errors of the 4 major Buddhist schools. So he's already been attacked, he's been tried to be killed, he's been exiled, and he won't keep his mouth shut. And he is attacking the absolute tip of the spear of the power structure of the government, okay? And all of the leading religious figures that they all are obeisant to, all right? So he's a badass. He's not afraid of anything. In 1271, during a severe drought, Nichiren received word that Ryokan of Gorakuji Temple, an influential priest, and one that he ultimately identified as one of the 3 evil priests, or the last of the 3 poisons. One of the 3 poisons. An internal priest, an influential priest of the True Word Precept School. Now, what's the True Word Precept School? They take the concepts of the True Word, mudras, all that shit, that school, and they combine it with precepts. So you only do this. This is what makes you a good, pure, better than everybody else person. You don't eat this. You don't do this. You go whatever. You follow a bunch of rules. So this is a convoluted combination of True Word and precepts. Okay, it didn't exist 100 years, 200 years earlier. Okay. So Ryokan, an influential priest of the True Word Precept School, intended on behalf of the shogunate to conduct official prayers for rain. Okay? Nichiren sent Ryokan a message challenging him to a contest to determine the validity of their respective teachings. Nichiren proposed that if Ryokan, through his prayers, could cause rain to fall within 7 days, Nichiren would become his disciple. If, however, rain failed to fall within that period, Ryokan would agree to follow Nichiren's teachings. Ryokan accepted the challenge. For 7 days, beginning on the 18th day of the 6th month, he and a number of other priests conducted prayers for rain, but not a drop fell. Ryokan requested another 7 days to carry out his rituals. Not only did he fail once more, but this time a fierce gale arose. Rather than admit defeat, Ryokan and his follower Gyobin, a Pure Land priest, filed a formal complaint against Nichiren. In addition, working through women who attended his sermons and were wives of influential shogunate, again, Ryokan's sermons, and were wives of influential shogunate officials, Ryokan incited the government to inflict punishment on his rival. Where are we at on time? Okay, we're going to stop now. I'm on page 24. Right in the middle, it starts with such machinations. We'll stop there and go on.